It's great to be here in the Moravian Music Foundation's archives building with Beethoven scholar and Wake Forest University musicologist David Levy, and also with research librarian David Blum, who's here in Winston-Salem. We'll be performing the Beethoven Sixth Symphony in a sextet arrangement, but obviously that is from a broader orchestration. David Levy, if you could please tell us a little bit about Beethoven's Sixth specifically.
Well, sure. Beethoven's Sixth Symphony actually was created at the same time and had its genesis alongside the Fifth Symphony. And in fact, they were both premiered at the same concert on December 22nd, 1808 at the Theatrum de Wien in Vienna. And in fact, the Pastoral Symphony was originally called number 5, and the Fifth Symphony was number 6. But when he decided to publish them, he published the Fifth Symphony as Opus 67 and the Sixth Symphony as Opus 68. But if you can imagine, that was a concert that lasted a good 4 hours in a very cold auditorium. And the Fifth and Sixth Symphonies I see as twin sides, or might say the flip sides of the same coin. Both of them use very terse musical material, that is to say very compact in the thematic range, but to very, very different expressive ends. The Fifth Symphony, high drama, lots of tension. The Sixth Symphony is what one writer called a dolce far niente, a sweet nothing that just takes its time and luxuriates and reflects, of course, Beethoven's deep, deep love of nature. I can't imagine the third movement of the Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique existing without the Pastoral Symphony as a model. You can't imagine Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony and Scottish Symphony as existing without Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony as a model, not to mention all of the symphonic poems and other types of works which were programmatic in one sense or another. Not that the Pastoral Symphony tells a specific storyline. Beethoven himself said it was more color, more feeling than portraiture. Nevertheless, we have the scene by the brook in the second movement. We have the awakening of happy feelings upon arriving in the countryside, dance of peasants, a thunderstorm, and then a hymn of thanksgiving at the end after the thunderstorm. So there was a certain specificity. And of course, at the end of the scene by the brook, we actually have Beethoven writing bird calls, specifically a flute equals nightingale, oboe is quail, and a pair of clarinets in unison as cuckoo. So this is obviously as specific as it gets. But many of Beethoven's contemporaries wrote pieces that they called characteristic symphonies, but none of them can equal the Pastoral.
David Blum, why do you think there is so much Beethoven repertoire in the archives of the Moravian Music Foundation?
Moravians collected and copied music of lots of European masters, and we have a really wide variety in our collections here and in Bethlehem. I checked back with a colleague's thesis, Barbara Strauss, who works here. She did a transcription of the register of performances done in Nazareth, Pennsylvania in the early years of the 19th century. And there are pieces of Beethoven on the programs, Symphony in C, which is probably the first symphony. There's the Hallelujah Chorus from Christ on the Mount of Olives, and some others that we can't definitively say what they are. There are a couple of pieces in the collections, in the congregation collections, which are actually arrangements of instrumental works which have been given texts. And so that's an interesting aspect of the Moravians' love of Beethoven music.
I know that the Salem band dates back to the late 18th century. So was there an orchestra as well that was fielded among the Moravian community, either here in Winston or in Pennsylvania?
There was here in Salem, Johann Friedrich Pater, who was a Moravian pastor and a composer, copied a lot of music himself, was here in Salem from 1780 to 1790, and during that time, established the Salem Collegium Musicum, and he's responsible for the basic collection of the Salem Collegium Musicum, which grew after he left.
Sure, you have to understand, in Beethoven's day, there were very, very few cities that had orchestras capable of playing Beethoven symphonies. And it was normal, even before Beethoven's time, with, say, symphonies of Haydn and Mozart, that transcriptions would be made in chamber form to transmit the music and allow people to hear it where there were no orchestras available, or even if it were in a city where there were, or a town where there were orchestras, to be able to enjoy it domestically. So domestic music making was something that was still very, very common and very popular. Now remember, the Pastoral Symphony was first performed in 1808 and then published in 1809, the parts that the Moravian Music Foundation collection owns here in Winston. But the String Sextet version comes about the same time, 1809, 1810. It was published in Leipzig by Breitkopf and Hertel. So it was around very, very early on in the life of the symphony. And then we have arrangements by Hummel for piano, flute, violin, and cello. We have a piano trio version with piano, violin, and flute, piano four-hand versions, piano two-hand versions, and so on and so forth. At least 7 different arrangements made of the Pastoral Symphony alone. And this was something quite common and a way of getting Beethoven's music heard. It made money for the publishers, of course, but it was a way of disseminating the music widely. Peter Paret, the former music director of the Winston-Salem Symphony, still lives in Winston-Salem, said once, and this has stuck with me, hearing a recording of a piece of music is like being kissed on the telephone. It just isn't the same. And missing live performances. I mean, the next best thing, of course, is what the Winston-Salem Symphony and so many other organizations are doing by broadcasting over the internet performances, which are live, taking place in real time. Well, that's the next best thing. I mean, what can we do? But nothing can substitute for being in a hall, hearing performers, because the visceral experience of live music making simply is irreplaceable. And we're all praying for that day when we can have live audiences and performers in the same space at the same time.
And we do have a number of these chamber ensemble versions of the symphonies. I think we have as many as 3 different settings of his second symphony in a piano, violin, cello trio setting, in a 4-hands piano setting, and then I think there's a full orchestral.
I've never heard the sextet version of the Pastoral. I know it's going to be different, but I look forward to hearing it.